Okay, hello everybody. This is Jerry McHugh Jr. here with San Juan Resources for this month's San Juan IQ, owner president of San Juan. So thanks for being here. We appreciate all the attendees. We know how valuable your time is, so I appreciate you joining us. Last week I was at NAPE in Houston, North American Prospect Expo. There were over 400 exhibitors showing their deals on the walls and in booths, and we met with potential investors. I think there are over about 6,500 attendees. So considering who we are, I think that's a really good turnout. In our other series of millennials on the IQ, we have Tripp Parks here with the Western Energy Alliance. I didn't really ask if you're a millennial or not, but I'm just kind of guessing you are by your
fair enough guess. Yes,
your great looks there. So Tripp Parks has been with the Alliance for, we'll find out. And I want you to tell me what your rundown is of who you are and how things are going. I think, and we talked in the pregame a little bit about what it's like to be in this world. You're in DC. I know you wear full body armor when you go out and do a great job for the Alliance out there. So talk a little bit about your history, how you got to where you are, and what it's like in DC now.
Sure thing. Well, Jerry, thanks for having me today, and thanks to Pesco for sponsoring us. Glad to be here. It's always good to chat about what's going on in the industry and what role Western Energy Alliance plays and what role you all, the companies, play in supporting that. So yes, I'm Tripp Parks. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs with Western Energy Alliance, trade association based in Denver. We represent all companies engaged in exploration and development of oil and gas in the Rocky Mountain West, covering all the states from New Mexico up to Montana and the Dakotas. So we are always looking to be an advocate for the Western oil and natural gas industry for New Mexico and San Juan, and that's kind of our primary goal, and so as part of that, I joined the Alliance just under 7 years ago. 7 years ago in March, in 2015, I had worked here in DC on Capitol Hill in the United States Senate for a decade on oil and gas issues, among other things. Was looking for a change of pace and moved out to Denver in 2015. Had a good 6-year run there, and then decided during COVID, getting a little stir crazy, missing the body armor, as you put it, that goes on in DC, the mental combat, if you will. And so I moved back to DC last year. So I'm actually across the river, living in Northern Virginia, which is nice. It's not quite as shut down as DC is these days, but it is. It's never a dull moment out here in DC. As you mentioned, there's certainly a kind of perspective coming from the federal government these days on our industry that is not the most welcoming and positive. So I definitely gear up with the body armor whenever I'm going into certain meetings out here. But that's kind of my background. I guess a little more on Western Energy Alliance. We focus, obviously, being in the West, we focus a lot on federal lands issues. I think that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. How the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Land Management is impacting Western development, and then other things like Endangered Species Act and other wildlife issues. On the regulatory side, EPA and the ongoing methane rule and other rules coming out of that agency. So really focus on the federal government more than the state governments. Always happy to work with our partner state trades, NMOGA and IPA New Mexico, whenever there's an opportunity to do so and whenever they want some backup. So that's kind of the role we play within the trade association sphere. So Jerry, I'll let you kind of tell me where you want to go next with the discussion.
Well, I have some curiosity myself, because we're in the middle of permitting wells on federal land. we know it took us a really long time to get on sites with the BLM in our local field office in Farmington. We have, I know COVID has been a pretty good excuse for delaying things. Yet there's also been a policy change. So it seems like it's double, triple jeopardy as far as the wait times, the delays, all these excuses. And at the same time, we're curious about leasing. So permitting, leasing, it's kind of blocking and tackling. That's become regulatory has become a huge department. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you understand how you have to input all of the items into an APD, it turns out to be a lot of input on those kinds of things. I know it's more efficient, but just talk about that in general. What changes you've seen, obviously, this last year and a half, essentially.
Sure.
Or year.
Well, definitely the last year and a half, and really going back, I'd say about 4 to 5 years, we've seen a concerted effort on behalf of environmental groups and on behalf of now this administration, which is populated by political staff who came from those environmental groups, to slow down, to do anything they can to slow down leasing and permitting. So really it started all the way back in 2016, 2017, where environmental groups started to sue the Bureau of Land Management on their lease sales, their oil and gas lease sales, for failure to properly account for greenhouse gas emissions and the impact on climate change. So that was kind of a very little noticed lawsuit at the time. Western Energy Alliance intervened, and it kind of slowly made its way through the courts. 6 years later, we have not even resolved that case, and we can get into the specifics of that a little more if you'd like. But really, when we saw the administration change, that became the model for kind of what BLM is doing across the board. Over the years, there were a number of other lawsuits filed against really every BLM lease sale going back to 2016. It's not 100%, but if you're a betting man, you would bet that a lease sale, and therefore all the leases that were issued as a result of that sale, are under litigation somewhere in some court across the West. BLM, since the start of 2021, since the Biden administration took office, has, of course, I don't think this is breaking news, not held a lease sale. They have used kind of the backdrop of the litigation to say, our climate change analysis, our greenhouse gas emissions analysis has been insufficient going back years. We need to spend the time to make sure we are doing legally defensible analyses that go into these lease sales. And until we are able to do so, we're not going to hold a sale. So they canceled the first quarter 2021 sales that the Trump administration had done all the NEPA work for. It was fully to the point of being ready to sign and hold the sale. And as of today, February 15th, 2022, they still have not announced a date for those new lease sales. They have pledged all along that that lease sale is coming. We, Western Energy Alliance, on the very day that that President Biden signed his executive order on BLM leasing, essentially telling BLM to stop leasing, we filed a lawsuit. We have challenged BLM's failure under the law to hold quarterly lease sales. They are required, where parcels are available, to hold a quarterly lease sale in every state. So the fact that in the 4 quarters of 2021, and now we're in the first quarter of 2022, they've failed to hold a lease sale. We argue, and I think we feel pretty confident we're correct, that is unlawful. They are simply violating their statutory mandate to hold quarterly lease sales. That lawsuit we filed in the District Court of Wyoming. we were joined by the state of Wyoming, and there was a companion lawsuit filed by a number of other states in the District Court of Louisiana, challenging the failure to hold both BLM onshore lease sales and BOEM offshore lease sales. The Louisiana case that actually got a preliminary injunction against the administration's failure to hold lease sales. The judge said clearly this was a violation of the law. BLM and BOEM, you are required to hold these lease sales. That was early summer 2021, and now here we are 8-9 months later, still no word on the lease sales. So I think pretty obviously this administration is doing everything they can to halt leasing. It was President Biden's pledge on the campaign trail, and it depends on what day you asked him whether he was going to ban all leasing, ban all permitting, ban all development on onshore or offshore, but to some extent, he pledged to end the federal onshore leasing program. And we are seeing the kind of slow motion attempt to do that. Luckily, we've got plenty of legal recourse in fighting that, and we're doing it to the full extent that we can. We have fully briefed that lawsuit in the District Court of Wyoming and are hoping to get a favorable ruling any day now. Now, where that will leave us with BLM, who is already under a court order from the preliminary injunction in Louisiana to hold these sales, unclear. But we are continuing to fight that and doing everything we can to get leasing back up and running. So that's
behind the scenes. Then, they say there's a chance they're going to do some leasing here on some tracks. I was in the Oil and Gas Journal, or one of our publications, about 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
What were they saying about that?
The current administration has reinitiated the NEPA process for the parcels that were being considered for the first quarter of 2021. And they have repeatedly in court filings and in public said, lease sales are coming soon. We promise, we promise, we promise. Of course, they keep saying that, but they have not actually announced the actual lease sales. Furthermore, they have made no movement to prepare for the second quarter and third quarter lease sales in 2022. So it seems to me lip service to the extent that they can. They're obviously, I think, caught between a rock and a hard place of trying to satisfy the environmental groups who want there to be no leasing ever again, and the facts of the law, the law that requires them to hold lease sales. So it's very much a series of delay tactics and lip service, and trying to figure out what they can do to kind of thread the needle, if you will.
So when you talk about percentage of gas and oil on federal lands, onshore and offshore, what are we talking here?
Last numbers I remember were about 25% federal, offshore and onshore. So it's a substantial amount, and obviously, not holding one lease sale is not going to make a major dent in that, but not holding 4 years worth of lease sales is going to have a major impact on future production. And obviously, as we're seeing with sky high, crude oil prices and natural gas prices going up, the signals coming out of this administration are certainly having, I think, an impact on future pricing, and that's just that plays into the situation we're in right now these days. So yes, federal development is a major factor in overall U.S. production, and kind of halting it, as this administration seems to be setting the goal of doing so, is really having an impact.
Well, and does the administration get lost in the fact that with an energy shortfall looming, and I don't know if we're at the word crisis yet, but I mean, the way the world's going, we're pretty near. Are they lost on the fact that if they hold back domestic production and rely on on our friends in Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and
Right.
Iran to help us supply energy. Are they lost on that?
Well, you have
I don't
to.
think-
They're just missing the point when they go to when the same time that they are shutting down federal production, they're then turning to OPEC Plus and basically begging them to increase production. It's shocking. You know, they've made very public statements from the highest of high-ranking administration officials asking OPEC to increase production. And it's just it is a stunning disconnect. I don't have an explanation for it other than to say that they are beholden to the base that they have clearly turned to in all aspects of policy in this administration, who just don't want to see any more domestic production and are following that drumbeat and then having to live with the consequences of it, which are really impacting everyday Americans, obviously, when we're filling up at the pump and paying our natural gas bills. So yeah,
when you talk to your
great
friends,
explanation
I'm
for
sorry.
the disconnects, but go ahead.
When you talk to your friends in Congress on either side of the aisle, I mean, this to me just seems like another disconnect to the voter and another disconnect that this really hard swerve to the left is about. I think of some of our Democratic friends who have supported Western energy and all that we do. They throw their hand. How do they react to all this?
Yeah, well, I think the good news, and we've kind of got away from permitting, but I think we can come back to that later. But I think the good news when it comes to Congress these days is that there are the last few remaining moderates and those who understand the oil and natural gas industry in the Democratic Party who have held the line. You know, the Build Back Better bill had just provisions in there that came from the House Natural Resources Committee that would have been devastating for federal development. I mean, they're talking about royalty rates at 20%. They're at 12.5% now. New fees across the board on expressions of interest and everything you can imagine, raising bond requirements. And we thankfully were able to talk with our, the man of the hour, the man of the year, Senator Joe Manchin, but also in the House, Henry Cuellar in Texas and others, who came out and said, you know, publicly sent letters to the administration and to their colleagues in Congress saying, we cannot live with this. This would be so destructive for oil and gas, and really shut it down. And obviously, Build Back Better didn't die on, you know, the oil and gas provisions, but they were significant enough that they really caught the attention of those few moderates who were against it. And I think the good news is that that bill appears to be dead in the water, finally. I mean, we spent a year talking to our friends on both sides of the aisle in Congress about the impacts from that legislation, but thankfully I don't see it coming back this year, but we will remain vigilant on that. So there are, I guess, to go back to your original question, there are the great remaining few in the Democratic Party who understand the value of our industry to this country and the impacts of shutting down federal production.
So that's probably a good time to pivot to the Legal Defense Fund, which helps fund these very worthy suits. Can you talk about that a little bit? So maybe some of our participants can take back to the office and do something with it.
Well, Western Energy Alliance has intervened in 6 lawsuits challenging BLM lease sales. We filed a lawsuit, two lawsuits under the Obama administration against their methane rule and their hydraulic fracturing rule that came out of BLM. And we've had great success. We have been able to fight back against the worst policies of both the Obama administration and the Biden administration. And that's really only possible because of our legal defense fund. Our member companies and companies who aren't members, but who appreciate the work that we are doing, contribute to that fund. And we are always open to any and all contributions of any amount. And that goes to fund the legal work that really some amazing lawyers, amazing law firms do for us, based primarily out of Denver. We are lucky to have just expert legal teams who have been representing us going back really a decade plus to the start of the Obama administration. Really the biggest triumphs were fighting off the BLM methane rule and the hydraulic fracturing rule. But under this administration, we are prepared for those rules to come back in some form. The lawsuits are actually still ongoing in the appellate courts, and the administration continues to say that we are working on new replacement rules. And then when it comes to the leasing lawsuits, obviously those continue. We intervened in, like I said, 6 lawsuits that were challenging the lease sales, and those lawsuits have been going on for years now. And so the Legal Defense Fund is really critical to the work that we do in just fighting for your company's interests in BLM leases. You know, these environmental groups, they don't just want to end future leasing. And here's maybe where we pivot back to permitting. They are going after your valid leases. They are trying to get your leases canceled. That is the goal of these lease sale lawsuits. The end goal is not just to say that BLM needs to do more environmental analysis. It is to cancel your leases. They are coming after them. And so that has been the tactic. We have thankfully prevented that. We had multiple courts rule against BLM for their NEPA, for their greenhouse gas analysis, but we have to date not gotten into a situation where any leases have been canceled yet. We have successfully appealed where kind of activist judges tried to do so. We've also made the good arguments in certain courts that have prevented that from doing so. So again, the Legal Defense Fund really helps us do that legal work, fighting for your leases, fighting for your ability to develop on BLM lands. And that frankly now is shifting to the permitting side. And that goes back, Jerry, to your original question about what does it take to get a permit from BLM these days? Because of the scale, the sheer amount of leases that are under litigation, BLM last year issued an instruction memorandum saying essentially that all leases that are subject to litigation for the greenhouse gas analysis reasoning, we are going to go back and do additional NEPA. And while, of course, your leases are valid while that additional NEPA is done, but we're not actually going to approve that. You know, we're going to do the work up to the point of the field office is doing the work up to the point of being ready to approve permits. And then they are sending them to the DC office, and the DC office is saying, okay, thanks, and sitting on them. And it is a intentional slowdown of permitting while they go back and do the additional NEPA, to the point, though, that really we've seen permitting grind to a halt. It has taken, you know, companies fighting tooth and nail with BLM to get, you know, individual, you know, one at a time permits approved, where they are in unit agreements or situations where they have to get those wells drilled. But, you know, in the big picture, BLM has done everything they can to slow down, to almost shut down permitting. And that has not gone unnoticed, obviously, by our friends in Congress. Senator Barrasso in Wyoming, and then Representative Harrell in New Mexico have been really great in pushing back on the administration and saying, look, these companies have valid permits and you need to be approving them, but
Unvalid leases too. Valid existing leases.
Exactly.
Where is that? I mean, what offices is that bad? I've never heard of the permits not getting approved and going sitting in DC. Where is that?
Carlsbad.
What states are that happening in?
Yeah, Carlsbad primarily. It's been a real slowdown there.
Okay.
We've seen it to some extent in Wyoming, to a lesser extent, but it is coming out of New Mexico, unfortunately, where it's just been a big slowdown. And of course, BLM would say that there is no policy against approving these permits, that they are merely doing their due diligence, but they are repeatedly just blowing past the statutory deadlines and the regulatory deadlines to approve those permits. And we've certainly seen, we saw under the Trump administration, the timeline for approving APDs just went like this. And now we've seen it go right back up under this administration. It was up to 300 days on average under the Obama administration. I believe under the Trump administration, they got it down to a couple of months. But we certainly are seeing average APD approval times skyrocketing once again.
How do you know if they're sitting on your permit? How do you know that if you're like an operator?
Good question, and that's part of the tactic.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes repeated communication on behalf of the company to understand exactly where your permit is in the process, what's slowing it down, and it has been they've ground the gears. They have made it so that it is as hard as possible to get a permit approved.
I can't remember what it all stands for, but the AFMIS.
Automated Fluid Mineral Support System.
Okay, that's what you apply for, and you fill all the paperwork out. I think if you're applying for 100 permits, you probably need some AI to help you. AI to help with AFMIS.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah. We've been coordinating with BLM for the last 2.5 years. Since AFMIS, the updates to AFMIS went live, and it required that you use AFMIS rather than a paper APD. That's been a whole nother disaster. Let me tell you, the technology behind that is antiquated, and BLM knows it, and they're working. The careers are doing their best to fix it, but man, that's a whole nother beast to getting your permits approved for sure.
When I started out in 1980, this will make your skin curl. We had a full 7-page application with notice to lessees, I think of 1976, the FLIPMA Act of 1976. FLIPMA meant something land policy.
Federal Land Policy and Management Act.
And my boss at the time was super PO'd that it took 7 pages. He was like, "Oh, God, I remember you could just walk up to the manager and he'd approve it right there with your cover page and your plat page,
right.
and it was done." And
yeah,
he was longing for those days in 1981.
Yeah, well, gone are those days for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I understand. Well, I think the idea of it automated is a good one, because then you can change things easily. But from what our permitting people tell us, it's just a real hard push on all that. So
yeah, we supported the move to automated, although we said, put it out in test form, make sure it works before you go live, and don't make it mandatory. But they didn't bother to listen to us on that. So here we are with this program as it stands.
When I get notices from our field office that the AFMIS system is down or broken or whatever, at least, I don't know, 5 or 6 times a week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know our regulatory person, folks out of Farmington, they work really hard on that. But I mean, one thing I'm trying to do, and maybe it's the start of my career, a good part of my career was just getting really good at permitting and just really good at digging in and getting these things done. So, I mean, that's been one of my goals as an operator.
Yeah.
We don't have 100 permits like some of the operators down in the San Juan do, but we'll have a good number as we move on this next year. So, we really want to be good at it and be able to work through the system there.
Mhm.
The manager down there is that the BLM is a very, very good, capable guy. He's attentive. We've said, hey, our permits are coming, just kind of alerted him. He kind of sent out an email to everybody. It's actually on an existing pad. So
Yeah.
all the work has been done. So we try to do things like that to make it easier, but I don't know what the easy button is with these guys anymore. So.
Yeah, hard to tell. Well, you have to appreciate the good career staff at BLM who are doing their best. They are also, I think, frustrated with what's come out of DC in the last year plus. So have to put in a good word for those who are doing their best on your company's behalf.
Tripp, what are your thoughts on a potential change into either the House or the Senate this next year? What kind of impact will that have on the BLM? Just generally, what kind of impact on lease sales? What kind of impact on? Will it just be gridlock that you got to? They'll just, or will they try to make a deal somehow to say, hey,
Sure.
we're trying to work with you guys, and hey,
Yeah, well, I certainly think having a chairman of the Senate Energy Committee from Wyoming would be able to put a lot of pressure on BLM. Not that, as ranking member, he doesn't have some sway, Senator Barrasso, of course. But yes, I think you would see a lot of oversight hearings. They would be calling BLM and Interior staff in all the time saying, why is this not working the way it's supposed to work? We'd certainly welcome some oversight there. I think really where you would perhaps see it is, in a deal on one of the must-pass bills that always, comes at the end of the year. Seems like it always comes December 23rd or so. Maybe we get some sort of provision in one of those bills that clarifies BLM's, requirements on the greenhouse gas front, or anything when it comes to leasing and permitting timelines. That's something that certainly we would look forward to working with a Senate or a House leadership team in the right committees who would be leading that debate. Unfortunately, we're at least a year away from that. We have the Congress that we have these days, and so it's going to continue to be really working on the regulatory front and the legal front as best we can. And I guess I should add, I talked earlier about Build Back Better and all the provisions in there that don't seem to be going anywhere, thankfully. Of course, the BLM and the Department of the Interior over the last year did their comprehensive review of the onshore and offshore oil and gas program, which ended up being a pretty underwhelming report to review, something that didn't seem like it should have taken nearly as long as it did to publish. But in that report, they, in claiming that oil and gas companies aren't paying their fair share, and I'll put fair share in quotes, of course, indicated that they are looking to raise royalty rates. They're looking to raise some of the fees associated with leasing and permitting, that they are looking to increase bonding requirements. So I think we are going to see a rulemaking of some sort in the near future on a number of those provisions. Unclear when that will be. Like I said, that the report that initiated that rulemaking took a lot longer than we expected, and kind of the bureaucracy tends to go as fast as a turtle, obviously, but we do expect to see a rulemaking on that front some point this year. So that's really where we're going to be focusing on the regulatory side. So and I think we are pretty certain to see increased royalty rates on BLM leasing. I think that is almost assuredly coming. That actually is something that is within their authority. They have, under the statute, 12.5% is the minimum, but the Secretary of the Interior has the discretion to set a higher rate. So I would anticipate seeing higher rates on leases in the future.
What's your prediction of where it'll go? I mean, they talk 25%, like a fee lease in Texas or something like that. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, there appeared to be a leak, an accidental leak, a couple of weeks ago. The BLM posted on their website that the new royalty rate would be 18.75%, which would be a 50% increase on obviously what it is now, 12.5%. That was noticed by a couple of reporters and then pulled down from the website immediately within a couple of hours. So can't say for sure that that is the new royalty rate. That hasn't been officially announced or published anywhere, but that it appears that 18.75% is where we're headed, at least under this administration.
That's like 3/16. Holy cow, that's a ton.
Yeah.
Wow. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for deal making, does it?
It doesn't, but we talked about this in the pregame. We do have a kind of a card we can play, and maybe this is where you see negotiations between a Republican Congress and the administration. At the end of the Trump administration, the Great American Outdoors Act passed out of Congress and was signed into law. That's something we, Western Energy Alliance, strongly supported. And what that bill does is it takes money directly from energy development on public lands and puts it towards conservation and funding projects at the National Park Service system, NPS, to get our national parks back into good working condition. So, and 91% of the royalties that came from energy development on federal lands last year came from oil and natural gas. 9% came from renewables and other.
Grazing or something like that.
What's that? Yeah.
Like grazing rights.
No, not grazing. This is energy specific.
Oh, it's all energy. Okay, gotcha.
Oil and gas, coal, solar, and wind. But again, 91% came from oil and gas last year. So we're funding 90% of the $1.9 billion that is going towards upkeep and maintenance at the national park system. It's really just a tremendous program that directly ties oil and natural gas development on federal lands to our national parks, to doing the maintenance and the upkeep that we need there. So, where they are shutting off leasing and shutting off permitting, that has a direct impact on funding national parks now. I mean, that if you take away that $1.8 billion, that's a substantial hole in the National Park Service budget that they're planning on. So we love to support our national parks. We love that the industry, the revenues coming from the industry go directly to that. And this administration really, again, is it's going to run into competing priorities. By ending leasing and permitting, you are ending that revenue funding for our national parks.
Well, it's you can't make this stuff up, can you?
Right.
It's amazing. I'd point out today that there's an article yesterday in the journal, Daniel Yergin had it, how America is taking the pole position on oil and gas, really leaving the states with federal lands out of really trying to help the world with its energy. It talked about, it's a very good op-ed commentary that Yergin wrote. And it's, it talks about how they think that Exxon Mobil is going to be coming into the Permian. They think they should kick up production in the Permian to 900,000 barrels a day. That could add more, but that's, we're in competition with other states and other fee areas. That doesn't help with permitting. Is that lost on anybody either? The fact that I know Colorado and New Mexico are purplish, left leaning, that they don't care. They don't care.
Well,
But
I
Wyoming
think,
and North Dakota and Montana and Utah and some of these other places are kind of like, well, why are we being left out?
well, sure. And like I said earlier, the state of Wyoming joined us in our lawsuit challenging the leasing ban. The state of North Dakota also filed a lawsuit, I forgot to mention, later on. So certainly Wyoming and North Dakota have taken notice. I think New Mexico, with how much your education system is funded by oil and gas, I think it is certainly, it shouldn't be lost on Governor Lujan Grisham. And I think if you recall, at the start of this administration, she said that if there was a permanent ban on federal development, she would ask for a carve out for New Mexico, which was a curious, thing to suggest.
The governor.
Yes,
Yeah.
New Mexico
Yeah.
governor.
Yeah.
Which legally would have been, I think, the definition of arbitrary and capricious, but that's a story for another day.
Right. Yeah. Well,
it isn't lost on governor, but again, competing priorities when you have administrations that lean towards the progressive end and then also rely on the funding that comes from the oil and gas industry.
Yeah. So, well, anything, is Western Energy going to have any call-ups? How have those been with producers and with worker bees coming back and sharing? I'd done some of those in the 08, 09 timeframe, I think.
Yeah, no, I have
that, or I guess we're always welcome to come back and you take us around, right?
Yeah, no, I mentioned at the start that I moved from Denver to DC during COVID, and really that was because I missed being able to come back here with groups of our members. I mean, and I went to school out here, so obviously there are a lot of personal reasons, but really just it is, for all the the negatives that attached with DC, it is a fun place to work when you are having those meetings, when you're getting up on the hill. So very much looking forward to doing those again. We've seen a lot of offices have started to open up. DC's slowly, much slower than many states, getting back to normal, and looking forward to doing those call-ups again soon. I think probably into summer.
Well, I think this has really been good, Tripp, to have you on, and thank you so much. It's always great to hear what the Alliance is doing, and especially someone with boots on the ground right there in DC. So thanks for all your efforts and for coordinating. We'll try to keep this legal or defense fund, try to keep that supplied and all that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. It's always good to catch up and share what's in these days. So I'm always available to chat. I guess, Jerry, I don't know if you are able to get my contact information out to the participants, but always happy to take an email or a phone call and follow up on anything we've talked about today. And
it's Tripp Parks?
Nope. It's
T Parks.
T Parks, yep. At westernenergyalliance.org. All spelled out, really long, but no hyphens, dashes, anything like that. Just tparks at westernenergyalliance.org.
Let me see if I did this right. I think that's about right. If that's wrong, let me know.
Nope, you got
it. Okay. Well, this has been very, very informative. And like I said, we're all kind of lost on the fact that our government does not support domestic energy unless it's, but quite frankly, oil and gas, domestic oil and gas is the most heavily regulated in the world. It's probably the cleanest fossil fuel in the world. This is what we want to advocate for, that we don't want to crawl into caves and try to depend on unreliable high cost renewables, which it is not going to help us at all. So thank you very much again. It's awesome. Our next IQ is going to be in 4 weeks from today. It's going to be March 15th and Tuesday, 9 a.m. And we have Jim Deemer with Sempra LNG, midstream commercial VPs, regional VP and midstream development, Sempra Energy. It's a rather long title. So we'll be speaking about energy transition that large utility is doing in Southern California, initiatives that Sempra has in the California and Baja area, the Coastal Azul plant that they are turning around as an outbound LNG plant. It's going to be about 2 BCF a day of outbound domestic U.S. gas. And there's a host of other markets out there which we'll be discussing. So big ideas are going to be coming on that next podcast. And then the one in April, we've got Dr. John Constable. He's with the Renewable Energy Foundation out of the UK. He's a writer, researcher for this foundation. I heard him last week on Robert Bryce's podcast, the Power Hungry podcast. So I don't know if you watched that, Tripp, but it's a really great podcast. So if you want a little preview of what we're going to talk about, Dr. Constable talked about the UK's headlong foray into renewables, how that's costing their country so much. People are, they can't heat their homes. The low income and middle income people, it's just taxing them to death. So what can we in the US, what can we in New Mexico and different states and areas, what can we learn about all this sort of stuff? So that's really looking forward to that. So again, thank you to Lori Walters for backing me up. Even on her vacation, she's helping us in Hawaii. She's been with us for over 18 years, and she handles all of our back room, all of our, she runs the company here at San Juan Resources. So Lori's just the best. So awesome job, Lori. And thanks for all of you letting me, for taking the reins on these important discussions in our San Juan Basin. So thanks a lot. Again, Tripp, thank you very much. Enjoyed it. And we'll just keep fighting the great fight. So bye for now.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, we'll see you.